Now, if you have been following my coverage for a little while now, or just generally if you happen to live in this country, then you're probably aware that free speech on college campuses has gotten more and more restrictive with things like safe spaces and hate speech laws limiting what people are allowed to discuss on college campus. However, I recently met a woman who is actually working to change that in a very practical way. While I was down in Florida about 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to sit down and speak with Cherise, the executive director of an organization called Speech First, and we discussed the practical legal steps that she's using to fight back against censorship on college campuses. Take a listen.
All right, so we are here in Florida at this year's CPAC, and we have the unique opportunity of being able to sit down with Ms. Cherise Trump, who is the executive director over at Speech First. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Can you please introduce yourself as well as the organization?
Yeah, certainly. So Cherise Trump, executive director of Speech First, and basically we litigate against universities that violate the free speech rights of students. And what I mean by this is we look at policies on campus that focus on issues with like harassment or bias response teams that specifically target speech, which is constitutionally protected. And we look at public universities, and our members on those campuses are the ones who kind of tell us what's going on, and we sue on behalf of them. So we represent them in the court of law.
So before we dive into some of the cases, I'm sure our viewers are wondering your relationship to Donald Trump.
Yeah, I know. I get the question often. I'm used to it now. I always try to crack a few jokes, but no, there's no relation that I'm aware of, at least.
Well, have you done a genealogy test?
I have not. It's actually my husband's name, so maybe.
There you go.
Maybe.
So can you give us some examples? Because, of course, the issue of free speech on campus has been blowing up recently. Tons of examples on social media. Can you give us an example, maybe one or two examples of concrete cases?
Yeah.
How they, what happened and how the case progressed once you took it up?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we have 3 open cases. This week we just filed against the University of Houston. Their harassment policy includes anything. It's incredibly broad. It includes anything from denigrating jokes, stereotypes, microaggressions. So if students basically have any kind of mainstream opinion and someone thinks it's offensive, they could actually be accused of harassment and processed through the Title IX office on their campus, which is a serious accusation. And it's something that students, I think, are very, it's not just a matter of fear, but they know that this will follow them, in their career and online. They'll be attached to harassment case on their campus, or they could even be kicked out of school. So this is something that we, our members came to us and said, look, we have mainstream conservative ideas on campus. We just want to talk about the transgender issue, which is a big issue right now in Texas, whether transgenders compete on athletic teams on colleges, as well as the pro-life issue on college campuses as well with what's going on in Texas. This is something they want to talk about with their fellow students and in their classrooms, but they feel like if they do, they're going to offend someone to the point where they actually get it reported. So this is one really good example of what's going on. We have a couple other open cases as well. The University of Central Florida and Virginia Tech University. The University of Central Florida is up at the 11th Circuit, and Virginia Tech is up at the 4th Circuit. And right now, both of those cases touch on a similar issue. They are called bias response teams. And these are anonymous reporting systems that are on campuses where students can actually report anything that's considered bias, unwanted speech, or offensive speech using these really, again, overbroad and very subjective terms that, this type of speech is protected by the Constitution. It's important that we continue to remind everyone that in this process. But students can actually report on one another anonymously. So there's no real due process attached to this. If you're reported on at your campus for maybe an emoji that you put on social media or something that you said, you made a joke at once and someone took offense of it, you could actually get processed through like the Dean of Students office, or even have to be going through mandated diversity training afterwards. So these are all, especially at public universities, this is all fundamentally unconstitutional policies, and this is kind of what we focus our issues on.
So in the example that you gave in regards to the school in Texas, so is it the case that even in a classroom setting, let's say if there's a debate on an issue, and you're holding the debate that there's only 2 genders, that sports in schools should not have biological men competing against females, and that's your stance, and that's the position you're defending in a classroom debate. Even that, it's to the point that even that can be then termed as harassment? Yeah,
well, the way that the policy is written, pretty much anything can be considered harassment because they use very subjective terms. They use terms of things unwanted, denigrating, or offensive in their policies. And so I would say that, first of all, a lot of times these debates aren't taking place. And this is what the students want that we're representing in our cases. They want to hold these debates. They want to challenge their fellow students, and they also want to hear what their ideas are too. But they fear that if they even like table or try to, have any kind of event or bring it up in class, that they actually will be reported either by the professor or by the students. And we have had students tell us that they have been reported on these issues. So this is something that is always on their mind, and they feel like they can't actually speak up about it. And it's not just a matter, again, of being like overly sensitive or afraid that if they speak up, someone might disagree with them. That's one thing. Having a debate is one thing. But they are actually afraid that they're going to be reported and, again, processed through a Title IX office on their campus. It's a very serious due process path that they'd have to go down on their campus. And this, again, so there are serious tangible consequences. It's not just a matter of being afraid to speak up because they're afraid someone will disagree with them. And I think it's important that we clarify that up front.
So can you give us an example of a case that you actually took up and what happened once you went to court?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had a number of really successful cases against the University of Michigan, University of Texas Austin, and Iowa State University, and University of Illinois as well, and Urbana-Champaign. And so these cases focused a lot on discriminatory harassment policies, as well as chalking restrictions where students weren't allowed to write certain messages in chalk, and as well as bias response teams, which I brought up before. And so all of these policy issues, again, they attack free speech. And when we took those cases to the district level, the district would sometimes rule against us or rule in favor of us. But then after that, we go up to the circuit level and appeal at that level on specific policies. So in University of Texas Austin, as well as University of Michigan, we actually won at the circuit levels in those, and we were able to settle out of court with the schools and have them change their policies, because that's ultimately what our goal is. Look, we're not suing for a bunch of money or some like harm or anything like that. What we're suing for is for them to change their policies to just have more constitutionally sound policies. That's all we want at the end of the day, is to just don't have bad policies on your campus that fly in the face of free speech rights on campus.
So once you won those cases at the district level, was there an appeal?
Yeah, so the ones that we went up to the circuit levels, they ended up settling out of court, and we won those at the circuit levels, yeah. And so the goal is essentially to one day hopefully get a case to the Supreme Court so that we can just settle this issue once and for all with discriminatory harassment policies and bias response teams.
So what if, let's say, somebody's watching this at home, and maybe they agree with that there is a need for, let's say, a bias response team or let's say hate speech laws on campus because people go to a university and they might feel unsafe otherwise. What would you tell those people, in regards to your position?
Yeah, who defines hate? Right? That's my first question, is like, how do you define what hate is? This is why the Supreme Court has upheld that hate speech is protected by the First Amendment, because it is a very subjective term, and it could mean anything at any time. And one time it could mean like actual hate, other times it could just mean something that someone just found offensive and didn't really like to hear. Again, we're looking at, this is the 4 years of students who are supposed to be challenging themselves the most. They're supposed to be developing their convictions. They should be challenged by others. They should feel uncomfortable at times so that they can maybe look into what it is that their position is and do more research and advance their skill set, advance their thinking, and be intellectually curious. They should want to have these debates. What we're worried about is if you have an entire campus where students are censoring themselves, because Fire just came out with a report at the end of last year saying 80% of students on college campuses that they spoke to say that they self-censor at one time or another. That is a huge percentage of students not expressing themselves, not speaking up, because they'd rather just avoid any confrontation at all. And that's the type of generation of leaders that we're going to have to face the world with, face the nation with. And this is something that we actually should be really concerned about. We don't want a bunch of folks who are just willing to keep their heads down and be complacent, and then they're going to be entering leadership roles and corporations and stuff. So I just tell students, look, at the end of the day, you should want to participate in these debates. This should be something that you want to do. Speech is protected by the First Amendment and in a very unique way in the United States. And that's something that's very special to the United States. And we should really embrace it.
So it's amazing work that you're doing. A lot of people are complaining about what's happening, but you are actually being proactive. How can people learn more about your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. Go to speechfirst.org and sign up to become a member. Let us know what's going on your campus or your student or your kid's campus or your grandkid's campus. Let us know if there's any issues where they feel like they can't speak up or express themselves, if there's any bad policies. But so the more we're informed by what's going on campuses, that is super, super helpful for us. But also, sign up as a member so you can get regular updates on what we're working on, what our cases, how they're going, but then also, our podcast and whatnot, and kind of like how we are in the media. So.
Cherise, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks so much.